My name is Vivian Brooks. I'm 28 years old. And that day, I was standing at my own wedding altar. An open lawn wedding in Sandy Springs, Georgia. White flowers. A soft breeze. Everything looked perfect, but underneath, nothing was perfect. By the way, if you enjoy cinematic real-life stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. 'Cause what happened that day was something nobody could have imagined. Standing in front of me was Elliott Carter, my fiancé, the man I was about to marry. He was holding my hand, but his grip felt weak. I quietly asked, "Elliott, are you okay?" He looked at me, just looked at me. He didn't answer. And right there, that was my first doubt. Sitting in the front row was Deborah Carter, Elliott's mother, my future mother-in-law. Her posture was straight, her face was stiff, and her eyes were locked directly on me. Not once did she look away, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. But why? Next to her sat Brooks Carter, Elliott's father, my future father-in-law. He kept lowering his eyes. His hands were tightly clasped together, like he was nervous. But nervous about what? The ceremony continued. Everything looked normal. But my attention kept drifting back to Deborah, because this wasn't the first time. For the past 2 months, every time I visited their house, Deborah asked me the same question. "Vivian, your past is clean, right?" The first time I laughed it off. The second time I explained myself. Third time, she stopped me. "Just answer yes or no." The room went silent. She said, "Yes." She looked at me, like she didn't believe me. And Brooks, every single time he was there. But he never said anything. He just listened, then looked away, like he knew something that I didn't. "Do you, Elliott?" The pastor's voice echoed through the ceremony. Everyone looked at Elliott. He looked at me. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, and then, "Stop." The voice was sharp, cutting through the entire wedding. I turned around. Deborah was standing there. Elliott's mother, my future mother-in-law. There was a file in her hand. The same file I had seen before at her house. She looked directly at me and said, "This girl is lying." The entire venue fell silent. That one sentence kept echoing in my ears. Nobody knew yet. That file wasn't just about me. She opened the file, but the name inside it wasn't mine. The wedding venue was still completely silent. Deborah, my future mother-in-law, stood there holding the file. Her fingers were tightly wrapped around it, like she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I looked at Elliott, my fiancé. His face had gone pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" he said quietly. But Deborah didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, like I was the target. I had already realized something. She wasn't only looking at me. She lifted the file slightly. "I have proof." Her voice was steady. "She's been hiding the truth from us." People started looking at each other. Whispers spread across the crowd. But nobody still knew what truth she was talking about. And suddenly, my mind drifted back. 2 months earlier. Elliott's kitchen. It was the first time I had gone there for dinner. Everything felt normal. Then Deborah suddenly asked, "Vivian, where was your last job?" I answered, "In Seattle, a consulting firm." She nodded, then paused. "Do you still have contacts there?" Question felt strange. Said yes. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, like she wanted to hear something else. The second time, it was the same question, just slightly different. "Who were you living with in Seattle?" I answered casually, but this time, she looked at Brooks. Brooks, my future father-in-law, immediately lowered his eyes. And right there, something started to feel off. Third time, she asked directly, "Were you in a relationship with someone there?" The room went quiet. Elliott tried to interrupt. "Mom, this is not I'm asking Vivian. She cut him off, looking directly into my eyes. I answered, no. She looked at me, like she already knew the answer. And every single time, one thing kept repeating. The file. That same file. Deborah always kept it close to her, sometimes on the table, sometimes inside a drawer, but always nearby, like she was waiting for the perfect moment to open it. And Brooks, every time he looked at that file, then quickly looked away, like he recognized it, but couldn't say anything. Back to the wedding. I said this before. Deborah's voice echoed again. This girl is not telling the truth. She opened the file, turned the first page. But she didn't show it to anyone. She only looked at it herself, then looked back at me. Vivian, this is the last time I'm asking you. Her voice dropped lower. Have you been hiding your past? Everyone's eyes were on me, even Elliott's, and there was doubt in his eyes now. That was the most dangerous part. I took a deep breath. My hands stayed steady. My heart was racing, but my face showed nothing. I looked at her and said, what exactly are you trying to prove? A slight smile appeared on her face, for the first time, but that smile felt strange, like she was completely certain that nobody could escape now. I just want the truth to come out. And then she fully opened the file, this time, turning it toward everyone. People leaned forward. Someone quietly whispered, wait, that's, then stopped mid-sentence. I looked, name, picture, details, everything was there. One thing didn't match. And right there, finally understood. She wasn't trying to expose me. She was searching for something else. I looked at Elliott. His face had completely changed. But he still didn't know the truth. I slowly reached for the file. Deborah didn't stop me, like she wanted me to see it myself. I turned the page. And in that exact moment, everything connected. The name wasn't mine. But that name could destroy this entire wedding. A soft wave of whispers had already spread across the wedding venue. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the file. But my eyes were stuck on that one name. I looked again, then a third time. No, that wasn't my name. I recognized it. And that was the most dangerous part. See it now. Deborah's voice cut through the silence. My future mother-in-law had stepped a little closer. And you still want to say you haven't hidden anything? There was victory in her eyes, like the game was already over. The real game had only just begun. I didn't close the file. I simply asked, where did you get this? The room went silent. It was a small question, but it hit hard. Deborah paused. 1 second. Just 1 second. But I noticed it. Her eyes shifted toward Brooks. Brooks Carter. Elliott's father. My future father-in-law. He immediately lowered his eyes. And right there, for the first time things started connecting. Seattle. The same city where I used to work. The same place this proof came from. I wasn't alone there. Suddenly I remembered something. Elliott's study room. An old photograph in a wooden frame. There was a young man in a suit. And beside him, a woman. Her face wasn't clear. But the name, written under the frame. B. Carter. 1998. At the time I hadn't paid attention to it. But now, everything was starting to connect. Vivian, answer me. Deborah's voice echoed again, this time louder. Who exactly were you connected to in Seattle? People were openly listening now. No more whispering. Complete attention. I looked at Elliott. His face was filled with confusion. Vivian, what is this? He asked quietly. There was doubt in his voice. And that was the most dangerous part. I looked back at the file. That name. The same name Deborah kept indirectly asking about. The same name that always made Brooks go silent. One thing still didn't make sense. That wasn't my name. Then why was Deborah targeting me? I quietly asked. You really think this is about me? A ripple moved through the crowd. People started looking at each other. Deborah didn't laugh. She simply said, "Enough with the acting, Vivian. Everything is written right there." She pointed at the file. I turned the page. This time carefully. Picture, date, location, and then the relationship details. My breath stopped for a second, but not from fear, from realization. This wasn't my past. This was someone else's past. And that someone else was standing right here. Slowly I lifted my head and looked directly at Brooks. He looked frozen, like he already knew what was about to happen. And Deborah, she was still staring at me, like she only knew half the truth, not all of it. I slowly closed the file. No panic, no rush. Elliott asked again, "Vivian, please tell me, what is this?" This time his voice was breaking. I looked at him, then at Deborah, then at Brooks, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't my story. I had simply been trapped inside it. What she thought was my secret was actually a secret from her own family. And now, it couldn't stay hidden anymore. The air inside the wedding venue had turned heavy. Nobody was exactly standing, but nobody was really sitting either. Everyone's attention was locked on one thing. That file. Deborah, my future mother-in-law, held it tightly in both hands, like she was delivering a final verdict. "Everyone should take a good look," she announced loudly. "This is who she really is." She lifted the first page of the file. People leaned forward. Some even got out of their seats to get closer. Elliott was standing beside me. For now, it didn't feel like he was with me anymore. "Vivian," he said quietly, "please, just explain this." There was fear in his voice. Doubt. Both. I looked at him, but I didn't answer. Because it still wasn't time yet. Deborah held the page out for everyone to see. "Seattle." She emphasized the word. "That's where all of this started." Some people nodded, like they thought they understood the story now. They were only seeing half the truth. "She was involved in a relationship there," Deborah said. "One she hid from all of us." The whispers got louder. "Oh my God! Is this true? Poor Elliott." I took one slow step forward. "No rush. Why aren't you telling them the whole story?" My voice was calm, but direct. Deborah stopped. She stared at me. "You want to tell them?" she challenged. I reached for the file. This time, everyone's eyes followed my hand. Deborah hesitated for a second. She handed it to me, like she was completely certain I would destroy myself with it. Took the file, slowly opened it. The same page, the same name. I didn't read it out loud. I just looked at it, then turned toward everyone. "What you're all seeing," I said, "is not the full story." Elliott immediately spoke up. "Then what is the full story?" His voice was shaking. I looked at him, then at Deborah. "You wanted me to be humiliated here today," I said quietly. "But you never actually finished reading this file yourself." Silence filled the wedding venue again. This time, even heavier than before. Deborah snapped. "I know everything." I slowly shook my head. "No." One word. Direct. Then I opened the second page of the file. Slowly. No drama. "This name." Pointed at it. "It isn't mine." People leaned forward again. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" For the first time, doubt appeared on Deborah's face. But obvious. I pointed at the next line. "And this relationship." Pause. The entire room held its breath. Then I lifted my head and looked directly at Brooks. "You recognize this, don't you?" Brooks froze. His hands started shaking. No answer. Elliott turned toward his father. "Dad!" His voice was barely audible. Deborah was staring at Brooks now. For the first time, Like nothing was making sense anymore. I didn't close the file. I just lifted it slightly higher. "This story isn't mine," I said softly. "It belongs to your family." And in that moment, the entire atmosphere changed. What she thought was my sin was actually her husband's secret. And now, it was about to come out in front of everyone. The wedding venue had gone completely silent. The only sound left was the faint sound of breathing, and every pair of eyes was locked on Brooks Carter, Elliott's father, my future father-in-law. "Dad, what is this?" Elliott's voice cracked. He took a step forward. But Brooks didn't move. He just stood there, like his legs had stopped working. Deborah, my future mother-in-law, was staring at him now, for the first time. "Brooks," she said quietly. There was no confidence left in her voice anymore, only confusion. I opened the file again, and held the same page out in front of everyone. Now everything was clear. 1998, Seattle. I read slowly. Name: Brooks Carter. Few people stepped back. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Deborah's face hardened instantly. "That's a lie." She said it quickly, loudly, like she was trying to convince herself. I looked at her calmly. "The file belongs to you. The documents came from your own source." She went silent, just for a second, but that second was enough. Elliott fully turned toward his father now. "Dad, please say something." There was panic in his eyes. Brooks finally lifted his head. But his eyes weren't on me. They were on Deborah. "Deb," he started quietly, but his voice failed halfway through. And right there, everyone understood. Something huge had been hidden for years. I turned the next page slowly. "No rush. This wasn't just a relationship," I said. "It was documented." I handed the page to Elliott. His hands trembled as he took it. His eyes moved quickly across the words, then suddenly stopped. "It says here," he whispered, struggling to speak. "Long-term partner." His voice broke. Deborah stepped backward. One step, then another. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." I looked at her. "You only read the first page. You never looked at the rest." The whispers inside the wedding venue grew louder again. People were openly talking now. But nobody fully understood the truth yet. And the truth still wasn't fully out. I pointed at the next line. "This relationship." Pause. Every eye turned back toward me. "It never ended before the marriage." Silence. Complete silence. Elliott looked at his father, like he didn't even recognize him anymore. "Dad, how long did this go on?" Brooks closed his eyes, like he already knew. There was no escaping this question. I still didn't close the file, because the biggest truth was still waiting. Deborah wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the file, like she was afraid of what the next page would reveal. I quietly said, "You wanted to expose me, but instead you uncovered half the truth about your own family." She couldn't say a word. I placed my hand on the final page, slowly, and stopped there, because this was where the real story began. This wasn't just an old relationship. It was the reason this wedding was happening in the first place. Nobody inside the wedding venue moved anymore. Every eye was fixed on that final page. In my hands, I slowly turned it over. No sound, only the soft crackle of paper. "Here's the full truth." My voice stayed steady. I handed the page to Elliott. He took it, started reading slowly. First line, second line, third, and then his breathing stopped. What is this?" he whispered. I looked at him calmly. "Keep reading." He did, all the way to the end, then slowly lifted his head. There was shock in his eyes, and behind it, understanding. "Dad," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell us?" Now every eye in the venue was back on Brooks Carter. Elliott's father. He took a deep breath, then finally spoke. Because it never ended. It felt like the air itself froze inside the wedding venue. Deborah immediately snapped. What do you mean it never ended? Her voice was loud, broken. Brooks looked directly at her. For the first time. That relationship in Seattle, he said slowly. It continued after the marriage. Silence. Absolute silence. Elliott stepped backward. One step. Then another. You were cheating, he asked. Brooks didn't answer. His silence was the answer. Deborah's hands started trembling. This is a lie, she whispered. But there was no confidence left in her voice. I quietly said, the proof is right in front of you. I opened the final section of the file. This wasn't just a relationship. These are legal documents. Everyone looked back at the file. Joint property. Shared accounts. And pause. The entire room held its breath. A child. Shock spread through the venue instantly. Elliott dropped the file. A child. He barely managed to say. I nodded slowly. Yes. Deborah stepped backward again. Like the ground beneath her had disappeared. No. She whispered. This can't be true. I looked at her calmly. You uncovered half the truth, I said, and placed the blame on me. But the full truth, I pointed toward the file, belongs to your own family. Silence filled the room again. Nobody spoke. Then Elliott quietly said, so, this wedding, I finished the sentence for him, was never supposed to happen. He stared at me, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. I looked directly into his eyes. You were never told the truth, I said softly. And I was turned into the liar. Deborah had collapsed into a chair now. Tears filled her eyes. Brooks stood there in complete silence. I took a deep breath, then turned around. Altar, flowers, the guests, everything was still there. But now, everything had changed. I quietly said, that day. Then paused. It wasn't just my wedding that fell apart. The mask built on their lies shattered too. I started walking toward the exit. And this time, nobody tried to stop me. Because now everyone knew the truth. And there was nothing left to hide anymore. If you stayed until the end, then you already understand. In every story what you see is never the whole truth. What do you think? Was Deborah truly unaware? Or did she secretly know everything from the beginning? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy high-retention cinematic stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because the next story will be even more dangerous.